Who could be the impact role player for the Orlando Magic as they try to make a playoff run for the first time in well over a decade? Well, we're going to talk about that today and really decide and decipher who could be the guy who comes off the bench to really make a difference for Paolo and Franz. Guys, welcome into the Magic Digest channel here on YouTube. We're trying to build an Orlando Magic basketball community here, so make sure to subscribe to the channel. It's the easiest and best way to support us. Now, this is coming from the site expert over at Orlando Magic Daily. They made an article just talking about who could potentially be that difference maker coming off the bench, who could be the X factor. Last year it was Cole Anthony, so we're not really going to talk too much about him. He was the leading scorer off the bench, but who could be that role player that really steps up for the Orlando Magic? Well, they did preface this by saying the excitement for the new NBA season is growing, especially among Orlando Magic fans, myself included. They're expecting a successful season. Now, what that is kind of just depends on who you ask, but I'm saying get out of the first round, compete in the second round, potentially against even a team like the Boston Celtics. And then obviously it mentions the offseason a little bit and what exactly could the team's ceiling be. Now, it sets the table for their list of role players. Now, we're going to go over the first three players, because they do name three, that the list does include. Now, the first one is going to be Wendell Carter Jr. Obviously, Wendell Carter Jr. has been a staple on the Orlando Magic for a fair amount of time now, but it's been injuries and just kind of what his ceiling is that is kind of preventing him from, in my opinion, being a guy that we can rely on long term. Now, I don't really think that it's completely out of the question that Wendell Carter Jr. can be a guy who steps up, especially since he might even vie for the starting center role. Now, I personally think that will go to Jonathan Isaac, but it's a guy who's averaged 11 points per game, 7 boards, and in previous years, not last year, we have been able to rely on him. There was a time where he was that second best player on the team, or even at certain times maybe even the best player on the team. I don't know how far I would go as far as like he'll be a 1000% an impact player, especially in the playoffs in the coming years, or even if he'll be on the team by the trade deadline or by after the trade deadline. But I definitely could see where they're coming from as far as this could be a guy that the team eventually does rely on in some instances, especially since he's been tenured with the Orlando Magic for so long. Now, another player that they have mentioned, and this is definitely a name that I can get on board with, is Jalen Suggs. Now, I've made a couple videos on this channel talking about, hey, look, Jaylen Suggs is involved in this trade and this deal, or how much money should he get? I personally don't really love the $30 million plus per year number. But with that being said, this guy is still an all-defensive player and somebody who is going to be the starting point guard without a doubt next season, and is probably going to have the ball in his hands for a fair amount of the time, especially if Paolo and Franz are not on the court, or even when they are on the court. He'll be that guy who is going to be entrusted in running the offense. Jamahl, Mosley, and the organization have definitely put a lot of trust in him, and we've talked about that ad nauseum over this offseason about how much they really love this guy. With Markelle Fultz leaving, I definitely see Jalen Suggs getting a lot of trust. And even with Anthony Black potentially coming into the fold, I don't really see that affecting anything as far as Suggs is concerned. His playtime is pretty much cemented. He's the guy. Bringing in KCP, in my opinion, doesn't really change much there when we're talking about just the impact that Suggs could have. Now, if we take a look at last season, there are a couple things that he does need to eventually work on. Now, you're liking the three-point percentage. He was the highest on the team, if I can remember correctly, but not really liking the 2.7 assists per game. Paolo has said he wants a table setter. Now, that doesn't exactly mean that he wants a new point guard, but it does mean that Jalen Suggs is probably going to have to move into a facilitator role that he's a bit unfamiliar with. So we're going to look for that in the upcoming season as probably the biggest determining factor about whether or not he can be that kind of player that we're all expecting him to be. But this is a guy that is probably going to get paid, hopefully, at a certain point in the near future. So I don't see why he wouldn't be a guy that we rely on as the season goes on. Now, another player that they did highlight was KCP. I obviously have mentioned his name a little bit now. He is the new signing, the highest paid player outside of, I believe, Jonathan Isaac this year on the team. And this is a guy who headlined our free agency. Now, brings a ton of experience, 2 rings with 2 separate teams, and is definitely somebody that I'm very glad that this team has invested in. I think that this is probably the most obvious, right? The most obvious helpful role player to to begin with. I mean, Jalen Suggs, I don't even want to almost call him a role player in a sense. I think I almost reserve that title for guys who will make under $30 million per year. But hey, the money is crazy in the NBA, so I don't really want to put that on him. But I think Jalen Suggs is certainly on a separate level, right? You're kind of hoping he can get into that big three category with Franz and Paolo, makes that big three. But enough about him. Like I said, KCP is also on this list, and he averaged 10 points per game, and he's had a ton of veteran leadership. And they brought him in for one reason and one reason only, and that is going to be you want to be able to rely on him in the playoffs. That is probably the biggest key. We've seen Suggs in the playoffs. We've seen even Wendell Carter Jr. and everybody else, for the most part, who I'm about to also mention, on this list, separate from their list, but on my own personal list. We've seen them in the playoffs, and it's not been like the greatest. We still have those problems, right? They didn't fix any of the issues in that Cleveland series or in any other stint that they've ever had. This is a guy that you can and should and will, I think, be able to rely on come playoff time. He's shown that multiple times with different teams, and I think that is one of the biggest things about KCP that you like. Personally, he would be my, outside of Suggs, because I do think Suggs' ceiling is just the highest on this list. I think that this would be the guy who would be the X factor, the difference maker on the list. So I definitely agree with it. But overall, I think that this bench is just something to really, really be happy about. And I'm certainly not going to be scared of the fact that, we're trying to figure this out. I don't think we have a shortage of options, especially on the bench. Now, I did want to get into some other names that are kind of honorable mentions in a sense on this list. They only mentioned 3. They were kind of trying to keep it short, but I definitely want to also hear from you guys in the comment section below what you kind of think are the other potential players that could make a difference. So I lumped the 2 rookies in with each other, Anthony Black and Jett Howard. Those are 2 guys who didn't really get a ton of time last season. Anthony Black has had some injuries, and then Jett Howard was kind of a G League mainstay for the Magic organization. So this upcoming year with their better summer leagues, I think that they'll both get more of an opportunity. I think Anthony Black with Markelle Fultz, I think that that's where he's the main beneficiary of the Fultz departure is Anthony Black. Now, Jett Howard, I think he fits the team better, but you're bringing in another forward into the rotation in Tristan da Silva. We'll just see the potential there. We'll see if they want to roll out Jett Howard immediately or if it's going to be another kind of wait and see year. I don't think he's going back down to the G League or anything like that, or if he does, not for too long. But I think he's going to be that main dude. And obviously, I don't think that they're going to at all. And I must, continue to take this home and reiterate this. I don't think they're going to treat him at all like they did last year. But the other guy, like I mentioned, was Tristan da Silva. We're not really used to a 23-year-old rookie coming into the fold on this team, a win-now type of player immediately getting inserted into the lineup straight from last year's draft. Well, that's going to be Tristan da Silva. And we saw it in the Summer League. He was ranked as the second best newcomer by ESPN as far as the Summer League performances were concerned, right behind Khalil Ware from Miami. I think that is really good company to be in, right? Any young unknown-ish player from the Miami Heat. Obviously, he was drafted in this previous draft class. But when you're in that sort of company, you're automatically thinking the Miami Heat, they're going to develop those guys. Well, Tristan da Silva had a really good Summer League, and I don't really see any reason why he wouldn't be in the rotation getting actual minutes pretty much from day one. Or after that 10-game opening stint that the Magic have on their schedule where it's like 7 or almost 8 road games against pretty tough competition. I think after that they'll probably shelter him a little bit, but then when they get back at home, I think they'll definitely try to bring him into the fold more. It's all about keeping above water after for those first 10 games. But after that, I think they'll definitely be able to open up the rotation no matter who. Now, I did mention earlier that that Wendell Carter Jr., giving away my hand a little bit, that Wendell Carter Jr. was potentially going to be that starting center. Well, I will say his health is an issue, but Jonathan Isaac has also had health issues. But I definitely think, especially taking into consideration last season was like his only healthy year almost ever, that Jonathan Isaac could definitely be that guy who ends up being the starting center. Now, we obviously got Mo Wagner and Goga, but I think Jonathan Isaac, especially with his defense, will be probably somebody that gets the nod, especially as the season goes on, if he can stay healthy. I think he just fits the identity in a way that makes this team whole and gives us such great chemistry. And in the similar fashion that Wendell Carter Jr. has been on the team for a while, as well as Cole Anthony. Another shout out. I have to mention Cole Anthony once more because that might be his final mention there. That's just really important. And those are some guys that you think you can rely on. If as long as they stay healthy, I don't really think we're too worried about what he can do on the court. And I think especially come playoff time, he won't get phased out of the rotation. He'll be a guy who can really support some of the guys, some of the forwards who are, carrying the offensive load. He can support them on defense. Really, really great defensive player. And when the refs swallow their whistle, Jonathan Isaac will be right down there in the middle, blocking shots and causing havoc. But guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Who do you think is the most important role player on the bench for the Magic in this upcoming season? And what do you think exactly the Orlando Magic are going to go to come playoff time? But that's all the time that we have for today. I will see you guys next time with more Orlando Magic basketball content.